This was an interesting story. So Cade Cunningham, the number one overall pick in this past year's NBA draft, he weighed in on the LeBron MJ discussion. I'm sure people have already seen what he said. I'm sure it's caused a big ruckus at different barbershops, grocery stores, sports bars. Probably caused a lot of heated discussions, maybe some broken bottles as well. And so let me first say this. I grew up in Los Angeles, born in 1997. So my favorite player was this guy, Kobe Bryant. My favorite player, grew up in Los Angeles. He was obviously drafted by the Lakers in 1996. So for me, he was my favorite player. I've always thought that Kobe was the most skilled basketball player I've ever seen. He was my favorite player for the longest time, and he still is, but I always thought he was the most skilled basketball player I've ever seen. And LeBron, since I've been watching him, I've reached the conclusion that he's the greatest player that I've ever seen. Now, it doesn't mean that I think he's better than Jordan. It just means I wasn't alive to see Jordan play live basketball. So context matters. The time that you grew up watching basketball matters. And so when we think about Cade Cunningham and the comments that he made were, I've seen all the MJ stuff. The dude is different. I can't argue with the fact that you think he's the GOAT, but in my eyes, it is LeBron. So obviously people are going to freak out about these comments, and you're going to have the Michael Jordan supporters that are going to be in an uproar, and they're going to jeer Cade Cunningham on social media. And then conversely, you're going to have the LeBron fans that are going to laud and come to his defense and praise him. That's to be expected. But I think that what's really important here is the context. When did these guys play? What types of games do they have? What types of game does his game emulate and resemble? Before everyone just starts going to a frenzy and it turns into utter chaos. Because that matters. All that context matters. What size are you? How you play? What type of game do you have? Let's think about Cade Cunningham for a second. So this is a guy who's 19. He was the number one overall pick. He's 6'8", 220 pounds, taken number one overall. If you really think about it, the fact that he's choosing LeBron really isn't that surprising at all. Because why did Cade Cunningham get selected number one overall in this year's NBA draft? It wasn't because he was the absolute best scorer, the best offensive player, because that would be Jalen Green. It's because of the wide variety of elite skill sets that he possesses. At 6'8", he can score at an extremely efficient level. He can get to the basket. He's got great ball handling. He's got great vision. He's a great defender. That's why he was picked number one overall. He's got the most complete, well-rounded game out of this class, along with the fact that he's 6'8", and being able to still do all of this. That's why he got picked. Well, between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, who does that most remind you of? It's LeBron James. When you think about who's the best all-around basketball player, a lot of people gravitate towards LeBron versus Michael Jordan. So from that perspective, okay, who did he emulate? Who does his game model after? For Cunningham, it's LeBron. So it's not a shock that he is leaning towards LeBron in this discussion, because that's who his game models after. Now you look at, okay, well, Cade Cunningham, how old is he? Oh, he's 19 years old, which means that he was born in 2001. Well, in 2001, Michael Jordan was a shell of himself with the Washington Wizards. And LeBron James was entering the league in 2003 after Michael Jordan was retiring. So the only guy that Cade Cunningham grew up watching was LeBron. So you emulate and model his game, and the guy that you actually see live playing basketball is not MJ, but it's LeBron. Okay, so those are two reasons why you go with him. But the other thing is, again, not only did he grow up watching LeBron, he grew up watching LeBron in an era when everyone was claiming that he's the greatest of all time. You look at a sport like baseball. If you were to talk to the youth and kids playing baseball right now growing up, they would tell you that Mike Trout is the greatest baseball player of all time. And he very well may be. He possesses the skill set where you're not going to get much pushback. He is an absolutely phenomenal baseball player. And I'm not going to outright dispute that or argue that he's not the greatest of all time. But if you were to talk to baseball fanatics that are a bit older, that grew up watching more baseball players than just Mike Trout, well, you'd probably get a different answer. You'd probably get guys saying, maybe it's Willie Mays. Maybe it's Ken Griffey Jr. Maybe it's Babe Ruth. So the era that you're watching the baseball in, or the basketball for this matter, is extremely, extremely important. And then let's think about his size. Well, he's 6'8", and he's 220. So between Michael Jordan and LeBron, who does he most remind you of when it comes to the size? It's LeBron. LeBron 6'9", 250, if not weighs more. He's not a 6'6" shooting guard. He's a 6'8", big, stable, all-around basketball player. So it's not a surprise that he's gravitating towards LeBron. I mean, LeBron is 6'9" and is the quasi de facto point guard every single place he goes. It'd be different, and I'm sure that if I were to ask Jalen Green who's the greatest basketball player of all time, he'd probably say Kobe or MJ, because he's a 6'5" shooting guard and he's an absolutely prolific scorer. He's a bona fide scorer. That's what he was born to do. He'd probably even say Kobe because he's also 19. So he grew up right when Kobe was playing in his prime. He also didn't see Michael Jordan. So I bring that up just to say that before everyone start to crush and absolutely shred and trash Cade Cunningham, just remember that context matters here. That's extremely, extremely important. That the time, the era that you grew up playing can have an extremely big influence on which guy you're leaning towards. So to me, it's honestly not a big surprise at all that Cade Cunningham went with a guy like LeBron. They're both picked also number 1 overall. Michael Jordan was the 3rd overall pick. So not surprising at all to me that the guy that he chose is the guy that he more resembles, more emulates, and models his game after. That makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense.